Come on. Ah, recording has started. Huzzah. Awesome. Now let's make sure I'm live. Sometimes it takes a second. There we go. 2 people are watching. I see a person. I got sound. Sometimes it takes a second. Yep. Awesome! Hi guys. Happy Wednesday. It's Wednesday, right? Yes, it's Wednesday. Oh, it's a day. Let's move it forward. Huzzah! Say hello if you're here. Hi. So, the quality looks a little funky. It's okay. Hello, Joanna. Joanna. I'm just gonna go Joanna. I have to resist the urge to sing Sweeney Todd whenever I see your name. Hi, Anna! Yes, it's a Wednesday. It's hump day. Everybody's off. It feels funky today. Today, we are going over the Fool's Intuitive Journey, Day 2. Haha! No, I fixed you. There we go. Whatever. I'll adjust it. We'll give it a couple seconds for people to get here. I hope you guys have your tea. I'm different today. I got my Spice Dragon Chai instead today. Let's split this up. Let's get a little fancy in here. Make this easier on myself. I have so many windows open. No, I don't want to donate. Why is it popping up like that? There we go. Awesome. So, everybody, I see people. Hi, Marissa. Hi, Lisa. Hi. Welcome to the stream. So, yesterday we started off with the beginning part of the Major Arcana. And, you know, we saw the Fool kind of get going. You know, he's seeing different people he can aspire to be. He's seeing, he's starting to think a little bit about where he wants to end up with his cupcake making journey. You know. So now we're going to get into the transition part, because if you just have a goal to get something, to get the best cupcakes ever, you have to spiritually be ready for the best cupcakes ever. And sometimes that spiritual burden is not enough to bear, you know? So we're going to go right into it with preparing ourselves for spiritually being ready for these cupcakes. Hi, Jennifer! Jennifer might have to jump off early for a client. You're totally fine. Go make money. That's what replays are for. Also, if you guys want to follow along, I have the next link for the second workbook. Let me get this link for you. In the top of this thread, but let me pin it. Pin the comment. Aha! Pinned the comment. So, you guys have that. If you would like to follow along, it's got all the fun goodies from yesterday as well. We also have the thread. I'll post this a couple times where you guys can put your journal findings. Right there. So, that's another one. Can I pin both of these? Can I pin both? No, I can't. Let's pin the workbook for now, and I'll just post the other one later. So, if you feel like you'd like to share with the rest of the group your journal findings for, you know, as we go through the transition cards today, feel free to do so. Also, the questions that I want you guys to be asking yourselves as we go through this are on that post as well. So, fun stuff. Let's get started. Haha. First off, we have strength. Alright, so strength is, you know, good kitty. Taming the lion, basically. And the whole thing for strength is there's strength in patience. Not all the time do you want to act. Sometimes you have to sit and wait. We just got done with the chariot, where it's nothing but movement, but after the movement, you need to sit and wait, and you need to digest everything. That's why, before you get up from a meal at a restaurant, you need to sit and digest the food first before you get up and leave. Don't just eat and book it, otherwise you're gonna not feel good. And if you don't have this upright, if you have it flipped and reversed, then it's control issues and fear and doubt. It's like that moment in Bambi when they're hiding from the hunters and you see the quail talking and they're saying, I have to fly. No, you can't fly. Don't fly. I have to. I can't take this anymore. And she flies and gets shot. A little bit morbid, but it's that moment where if she had some strength and patience and she wasn't freaking out and took a moment to breathe, she would have lived, along with all the other animals. So, some herbs for this: basil, crystals, cat's eye, because cats, lions, haha. This deals with the sun for me in summer, because you have those days in the summer where you're constantly moving, you're playing outside, but you also have those days where you just want to sit there because it's so hot. And you're like, no, come to me. And a common thing, the reason why we jump super far ahead in Dreams of Gaia to self for this is because within strength, you need to find this balance and wholeness within yourself. You need to find your triggers, So if you look at all these images, all these women know their personal triggers with this cat, or with the dragons and the birds swirling around them. They know their issues and they're working at them, but they know they need to be a little bit patient. It's going to take time wringing a head off of that gargoyle for the Gothic Tarot one. Well, the Gothic Horror. It's going to take some time to wring that head off. So she is patiently screwing at it. It takes real calmness and complacency in order to deal with these animals, Hello, Taylor. Welcome, welcome. Alright. And if, again, just like yesterday, if you guys have questions as we go through these, or you want to share as you compare this to your own deck, and what intuitively pops up for you, do that. It'll be awesome. We love sharing. Okay, next one, the Hermit. The Hermit is sometimes a little bit hard for me because it deals usually with you being by yourself, and it's not really the Fool looking at someone else doing this. I feel like this is the Fool himself. If we're following along with telling a story with what he's going through. He's secluded himself because he realizes, I need to go through some inner work here in order to really fix myself. Which is why for the Gothic Horror, we see Alice sitting on a stump. We don't see somebody else, we see Alice herself. She's different from the beginning of her journey. She looks a little bit more hardened, you might be a little bit scared of her. Which makes sense if you actually read the Alice in Wonderland books, how she completely changes from the beginning to the end. The reason why for Dreams of Gaia it's wisdom, because not only does he look like the Hermit usually has a cloak, which is just an interesting thing to note. It's like you are casting yourself out if you have a long hooded cloak on. Is that wisdom means that knowledge is never ending. You can be as much of a sage as you want to be, as we saw earlier with the sage for Dreams of Gaia, but he still doesn't know what's in that hole, in that crevice. So he needs to go in there and figure it out and gain more knowledge for himself. And the only limit is your own fear and your own desire. So because monks can live in seclusion and meditation for the rest of their lives. This is a point where some people get stuck in this hermit stage. The Fool, this stage could easily take years for him, depending on what he's trying to contemplate about his end goal. Maybe, he's experimenting on his own, trying to make the perfect cupcake batter at this point, and he doesn't realize what in the world each ingredient does, and maybe he's growing them on his own and tasting and trying different things. So this is an area of your own little path to enlightenment. But one thing I want to point out for the hermit, because intuitively this goes a little bit with spirituality and no matter what you believe, but being alone doesn't mean you're lonely. Sometimes when the hermit comes up in a love reading, people think automatically this person's lonely. Not the case. You can be alone and choose to be that way, but you're not lonely. You're content within yourself. And that's why this is a period of meditation and reflection and solitude. You purposely were that way so you could heal and grow and get that strength aspect up, you know? Become the hardened chariot driver. So that's something to keep in mind. And because I associated this with winter, winter is a chance to create a clean slate. The hermit is usually seen on top of a snowy mountain, where things look dead. And if we were to give this a card for the hermit to give birth to, it'd be the Five of Pentacles. Because the Five of Pentacles is the same way. It's usually in winter. But winter does not mean it's a void wasteland. It means that it's a chance to start fresh. You know? And start from the bottom again and grow upward. So this is a chance to reset. You know? Make sense? Let me know if I'm just going off on tangents and you have no idea what I'm talking about. Okay. Alright. So let's keep going. Remember, hermit. Just trust your intuitive instincts on it. If it shows up in a reading for you, doesn't mean this person's lonely, doesn't mean they're alone, doesn't mean that they purposely put themselves in this solitude, or did they end up there and they hate meditating, you know? Okay, Wheel of Fortune is interesting because I've seen this in a couple of different ways, and one main one is not only is the wheel supposed to be luck, and that if you were to put yourself in this situation, you have the power to turn the wheel which way ever you want. So you could have a lucky day or a really crappy day, but you have the power yourself to reach out and turn the wheel. But also it deals with cycles and seasons. You have a season of acting and you have a season of learning. And I really want to emphasize here how important it is when you intuitively read to recognize your own cycles. You know, this is the time when the Fool is like, okay, I need to figure out my own patterns and when I best work. So he's going to be looking at his birth chart and at the energy cycling through his body, through his chakras, and his own moon cycle. Especially if you're a woman, you're going to look at your moon cycle, because that usually corresponds to your menstruation. And it makes it so much easier to deal with cards, because especially I personally believe when it comes to a tarot reading, it's all about energy transference. It's so much easier to think of energy as it comes out of the client through us as a conduit and into the cards than, you know, straight shots. There are no straight shots and straight lines in nature. It's all curving and bending. So think of this with the Wheel of Fortune. Things are always cycling through things, you know. And that's why union is what I picked from the Dreams of Gaia for this, because you see wheels typically when it comes to this card. We see it for the Gothic Horror and we see it for the Enchanted World, along with some weird squiggly lines on the bottom. But union is big on finding your own energetic cycle, you know, becoming one with both the yin in yourself and the yang in yourself, back to that masculine feminine balance, you know. Let me see. Make sure it's still going. Yes, it is. Awesome. So for this one, it's autumn. I picked, not winter, because autumn can be a time where you prepare for the worst, but expect the best. You expect a great harvest for yourself. The fool is expecting luck, and good things to happen and fate. But he's also preparing for the worst because of the winter he just went through for the hermit. So, the jamming and the drying of the meat and all those things that we don't do anymore. We go out to Burlington Coat Factory and get a heavy winter coat, and we put kitty litter in the trunk just in case we get stuck on the ice. Things like that. So, we each have our own little wheel of fortunes we go through as the fool when we go through this journey. So, recognize what cycles do you see in this reading? What energy transference do you see? If you're doing a past, present, future, were they wands at first and they turned into a water? That's a definite thing. We went through a passionate stage and now they're calming down, Really smooth. We're going a little bit faster today. Okay. Justice. Alright, so, big thing I noticed about Justice going through this yesterday. Like I mentioned, whenever I think of Justice, I think of Athena when it comes to a deity. Because of all the play literature I've had to read, because she is always, balance. But, as I was meditating over this last night, one thing that came to mind is not all the time does justice equal fair. Or justice equal the outcome that you want. It just means fair for both parties. And what comes to mind, and I may be totally off on this just because I was raised a Jehovah's Witness and their lore is so different from any other Christian thing. But we have the story of King Solomon with the two women who come into his court, and they're fighting over whose baby it actually is. And his thing is, fine, we'll be fair, we'll cut the baby in half, and each of you get a half. And one woman was saying, okay, cut the baby in half. The other woman was screaming, saying, no, just give it to her, please don't kill the baby. And that's how he figured out who the actual mother was, because she would rather give her baby away than have it killed. So that comes to mind. Was his solution fair? Well, was it even? Yeah, if we're doing an actual scales thing here, which is typically shown for the justice, yeah, it was scaled. But was it what both parties wanted? No. It wasn't in the slightest. So think of it kind of like that. Also think of divine judgment. If we really want to keep going with this intuitively and talking about symbolism and characterization, think of the Scottish play Macbeth. I'm not superstitious, so I'm going to say the name. It's Macbeth. So, you notice when King Duncan is killed, after Macbeth kills him, the landscape changes, literally. The lighting when he was alive was light, and the trees were growing, and everything was lush and prosperous. He was killed wrongfully, and the wrong king was on the throne, so then there's a note of horses eating each other, and the sky gets dark and everything dies, and lots of murders are going on. It's like divine judgment. Zeus was saying, fuck you, you're not supposed to be king, and had Athena tip the scales to the complete opposite, And then after Macbeth is killed by Macduff, and I can't remember Macbeth's friend's name, it starts with a B in the play, but his son is supposed to become king. He does, and the scales tip back, and light comes back. So it's kind of like a divine judgment thing here again, where it's not all the time is it fair, and so people don't get what they want. Macbeth didn't get to be king for very long, and everybody died. But the scales would tip back into the natural order. So, older knowledge also has a way of finding balance. Athena is a goddess. She oversees all, and she is nothing but fair, and she comes from an intellect point of view. Because she comes straight from Zeus's forehead. He went, and there was Athena. She wasn't given birth to by a woman. I wanted to point this out because for the Gothic horror we have Van Helsing. And, well, at least he looks like Van Helsing to me. And if you're not a Dracula fan, Van Helsing is, the vampire hunter that comes always to kill Dracula. And he is coming from a godly point of view, so angel imagery and divine energy is really strong for this card. He's coming from the point of view of what is good and what is evil, and having to balance them out. So he is a monster hunter that kills those that kill humanity, which is not good, and then brings the scale back by taking retribution. Hello, Christina. So, do remember, though, when it comes to justice, that it's okay to not think the outcome's fair. It's a neutral ground. You're allowed to think and say what you want and feel what you want, but there's always a cause and effect. It's always neutral. And a lot of this time, I do see this come up with legal matters, And it's interesting that when I was doing some research on this card, that Venus was the planet for it. Thought that was a little bit interesting. Tell me your perspectives on if that planet should change in the thread. Joanna said, if you read this card in relation to legal matters, I try and leave ethics out of it. I always tell my clients that legal or law does not always mean ethical. Yes, it's about balance. Yes, very true. Not all the time is the law in your favor. And not all the time does it go along with your moral values. Like, there are plenty of episodes of Law and Order, because my husband's going through a binge on them again, where if you go through it, not all the time is the outcome in the victim's favor. Sometimes the criminal, the person who commits the act, wins because of legal matters, and the legal system is not perfect. It's not balanced like this. Which I really admire about all the gods that are present for, well, gods in general, because they don't admit to be perfect. They show their own kind of bias. But yeah, it's all about neutrality. That's a fantastic point, Joanna. Okay, let's move on. Alright. The Hanged Man. This one's always fun, especially look at the Enchanted World. He's just, woo! He's just flying. And this is the way I think of it. All I can imagine is the fool got himself into a stupid situation like the Ten of Swords. Trying to get to that fair point. He was Tony and he went and interrupted the rumble in West Side Story, and it ended up super bad for him, and he ended up hung upside down on a tree. And he knows it is better to sit here and wait it out than struggle and fall and hurt himself. So, and you can see that really clear through all the ones that we see here that are all hanging upside down. For the Gothic horror, he's obviously flown upside down many a times. He's obviously the stereotypical vampire that can fly. So, when it comes to... Marissa says, Justice is easier for me to see as Libra than Venus, even though Venus is collected to Libra. That was what I was wondering. Because I'm like, this is a Libra thing, but if I had to pick a planet, Libra is associated with Venus, so it's just like... But Venus is with love, so it's... I don't know, that requires some further research there. And you see the Enchanted World Hanged Man is literally just flailing about. You can tell that's not going to end well with him flailing like that. He's going to get wrapped up in his cape, and he's probably going to pass out from suffocation and really be hanging there for a while. And the reason why destiny is picked with this is because sometimes destiny and fate means having to wait for things to come to you. It's a strength thing again, only this time you're not spiritually waiting and mentally waiting, you're physically waiting for something. Because you're in a physical predicament, but you're prepared for it because you have the halo, One thing that screams the Hanged Man to me is, if you're into Buddhist lore like I am, the story of Siddhartha Gautama going through his trials to become Buddha. And when he sits underneath the tree in meditation, this demon named Mara comes up to him and tries to tempt him out of it. And Mara is always described as the personification of forces antagonistic to enlightenment. So he's not a bad guy, he's just the antagonist to Siddhartha Gautama at that moment. So he brings his daughters forth, and, they're dancing and, shaking what they got and trying to get Siddhartha to get up and get out of his enlightened state. But because Siddhartha sits and he just lets it pass over like a veil, then he becomes enlightened. So in order to get to the glowy halo of enlightenment, or the moon of enlightenment, you have to sometimes sit and wait. Hello, Tamaria. Tamia? I'm sorry, I butchered your name. Welcome. I'm glad you could be here. So, think of that when it comes to the Hanged Man. We live in a society of you work to get what you want. Always. Work, 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 work. But sometimes you need to sit, and we are forced to sit. You're always waiting on a job application, or you're waiting on an apartment complex to get back to you, or things like that. You're stuck. So think of that sometimes when it comes to this card. What situations can you see someone forced to sit and wait? Okay. We're getting there. Second to last card. So yeah, this one is really, this one's going quick today. Death. I wanted to talk about this with death, because a lot of times people get the death card and, ooh, scary, there's an aria about it, and it's typical in any horror movie with tarot cards to see the death card, or some kind of figure that looks like death. And not all the time is death scary. Death is about transformation, and it's a change you knew were coming. But this is a transformative card, because like strength, it's a spiritual, emotional, mental thing. Physically, you knew the death was coming. Okay? There was no stopping it. But it's an inner change that you have to get used to. Okay? If you flip it, then it turns a little bit more into the Tower, which we'll get to. That's a little bit more traumatic because you're trying to resist it. But you need to let it flow through you. And it's autumn. It's not winter, because there's still room for growth after the death. It's not that tragic if you breathe and get through it, So we have some different deaths here. We got Dia de los Muertos for the Enchanted World Tarot. It just screams that to me because of the way the art is. It's so colorful. It reminds me of Mexico and how they celebrate death more than they mourn it, And it's like, the thing that the Dreams of Gaia brings to us is that rebirth is sometimes the most important part of death. With every death, there is room for a birth. Just another thing for characterization and to give a little bit of a story with it, because stories really help our intuition. For my senior thesis, I directed a play called The Intruder by Maurice Moiterlink. And basically the entire time, this family is waiting in their sitting room, waiting for somebody to die. You have a mother who's sick in one room, a baby that she just gave birth to that hasn't cried since it was born, and then you have this elderly father that's blind that is gonna go at any minute. So they're waiting on something to happen. And throughout the entire thing, the father is saying, his blind self, somebody's at the door. There's someone in the room with us. Why are you guys lying to me? Someone's here. And he's sensing death in the room. And I purposely did it with lighting, so the light was shining on next to the father when he was sitting there, and he's like, someone is sitting next to me. And it's really suspenseful, because you don't know who's going to die, and at the end, somebody does. And the whole thing with it, though, because spoilers, the mother ends up dying, The father is left in the room by himself, literally in the dark, because everybody just gets up and leaves him there. And the baby starts crying. So it's kind of like death came, took a life, and then new life was born because the baby started crying. It's a really symbolic kind of thing. So rebirth is the most important part of death. Remember, death does not mean it's the end. It just means new beginnings are coming. That's why usually you see life in the death card. You've got those children at the bottom of the Rider-Waite card. Enchanted World, you've got a leaf in the forefront. You have a child and an egg for death and rebirth. You have something there, you know? And think of these New Orleans funerals where everybody's celebrating in the street and playing jazz. And think of, you know, actual Dia de los Muertos where people are celebrating the death of their ancestors and remembering them. It's not a horrible thing to have a death. Sometimes it's necessary. But it's more of a spiritual, emotional, mental thing. It's not physical a lot of the times. Let's see. Temperance. Okay. Temperance. I noticed this going through and preparing for this, that with every little death that there is in these transition cards, and with what we'll see tomorrow, there's always a healing after it, you know? You have the Fool went through his mental death. He realized that, you know, he couldn't, you know, make the most spiritual, unicorn, glowy, frickin' cupcake that he wanted to. He couldn't make it as magical because it was beyond his limits right now. So he had a mini death on the inside. So now he has to go through a healing with it. He's acknowledged that he's disappointed. Now he needs to go through it. And it's like death and temperance gave birth to the Three of Swords. You know, it's an emotional, mental experience. You have to acknowledge the sword is in my chest. Temperance is taking out the swords and healing. But temperance is all about alchemy and equilibrium. I have issues with this card because it's kind of a justice thing where it's a balanced transference. And if you know anything of alchemy, a really good representation of it is Full Metal Alchemist. If you watch the anime, where literally you turn something into something else, but there's an energy transference. Something has to give in order to create. So in order to save a life, you have to give part of yourself, or things like that. And you have to have equal measurement. Which is why we have the angel giving an equal measurement. The temperance for the gothic horror is more direct. It's just more like it's forcing the transference. It doesn't look easygoing as it does with angles, as it does straight on. You know, and you notice the same thing with the Enchanted World. It's more gently pouring, and then there's an angle to try to make it a little bit easier. Angles are super important. Because if you think about it, really body language thing here to intuitively read cards. If you see it as a play, if someone is head on to you, you're going to look at them. Head on and standing up. They are in the most powerful position. They're still going to be in a power position if they sit down and they're still facing out. If they're at a quarter turn, it's a bit softer. You can still believe the situation, but it can be a power move if someone is turned away. If someone's back is completely to you, you're going to ignore them unless they are the only person with their back to the audience, you know? And same thing with a 3/4 turn, so like this, but you can see me looking over my shoulder. Pay attention to body languages when it comes to this. So the power positions for temperance, for the Enchanted World, you're looking more at the angel on the right, you know, because they're quarter turned. Not so much the person on the left, because they're half turned. And they're not even looking at you, they're looking out. Just as an example. So things to remember with temperance. It's the healing after death. There's always some kind of water following a air or like physical reaction where you're just at a loss for something. And abundance was picked for this from the Dreams of Gaia because you need to be grateful for what you have in the first place in order to receive more. You have to be grateful for the amount of water you already have in this cup and be satisfied with that before you can transmute it into something else. You know? It's also a spring thing here because spring is all about new growth and changing things. This is the time to plant the seeds to transmute into flowers and plants. You know? So, another thing here, it depends on different types of healing. You know? I see, and it may just be me because I don't know very much about angels, but Temperance for the Rider-Waite feels more like a woman to me because it's more contiguous with the positions. And when I mean by contiguous plot structures are like if you see the movie Memento, or a movie that starts at the end and goes to the beginning, or jumps all over the place like a soap opera. That's a contiguous plot structure, because there's many stories going on and many little climaxes, like a woman. But a man, which Gothic horror screams to me, I see that as a guy because it's direct. There's only one climax. It goes down into the cup. That's about it. You know. So, all the fun things to pay attention to during a reading, especially you can see the different angles and how they're going to mean different things. This woman in abundance has all the stuff spread out around her, you know? It's not all laid out perfect in a line. She's got abundance over here, she's got animals over here, she's got a dragon behind her, there's curves. It's very much nature's abundance, what you have, that you can then turn into something else. You know? So yeah. Let me know if that makes sense, you know? And this is the last card for today. So how are you guys feeling? I know there's a lot of metaphorical stuff today, a lot of body angles, a lot of, you know, yesterday it was a little bit more about feeling the Fool going through it. Now it's all paying attention to the tiny details, you know? And that really, especially when you get through this section of the Major Arcana, is really going to change how you do your readings. And how it differs from deck to deck. Because all you gotta do is pay attention to the tiny things, and that can drastically change your reading. So it's those little symbols that are gonna stand out to you. Like foreground and background with the Enchanted World Death card. That leaf is in the forefront. It's huge compared to how the skeleton for death is. It's like, this is more important than the skeleton, you know? Joanna says, very good, very insightful, learn new perspective. Yeah, and that's the huge things with this. That's why I have the threads where you guys can comment. It's where you can give your perspective on a card and really make it your own, you know? And then that's the awesome part about having a group like this, where we can collaborate with each other, because we all have our different types of symbolism, and we all create different characters by the decks we choose, and by how we give a reading. Different things are going to stand out. So it's pointing out those little things that are really going to make it so much more worthwhile for you. Let me see. Let me see. Are there any other comments? Cool. So, that was our lesson for today. Going through this series. Tomorrow, we're going to finish it off with the last 8 cards. And then I'm going to, you know, talk to you guys about what's ahead for everything. For the course. Well, for the course, for the group. Because next month we have all kinds of exciting things. Alright. Hello, Katrina. We just ended. So, I hope you guys have an awesome rest of your hump day. Okay? Really post and go through the workbook and compare it to your deck and share cards, and it's going to be so much fun. and you're going to get so much out of this. So I hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day. Even if you're catching up, I know some people are catching up, still post afterwards, and it's going to be still awesome. Okay, have an awesome day, guys. Oh, let me see. Jennifer says, yes, very insightful. Thank you. Anna says, gonna go and try to catch up. This day just disappeared. Love all that you've been talking about. Awesome. Yes, catch up. It's gonna be amazing. See you guys.